Welcome everyone to WriteHive 2024. I'm Patry Jones, and today I'm a little bit starstruck because I get the pleasure of being here with one of this year's phenomenal guest of honor, Bethany Baptiste. I am so excited. I've been waiting for this. I started reading the book, so I was just like, I want to be prepped and have an idea of everything. I've seen the cover and loved it, so trying to put fangirl mode aside and let's jump in and be professional here. So, of course, we've got the debut author of The Poisons We Drink, a YA urban fantasy. Bethany Baptiste is a slightly responsible grown-up living in Jacksonville, Florida, in a little brick house with her fiance, chaotic evil dogs, and too many books. She holds 2 degrees in early childhood education and has taught for 7 years. Now, as an inclusion specialist, she advocates for preschoolers with special needs, and when not prying a shoe from a schnauzer's jaws, she writes about Black kids with big hearts and little morals. Now, that beyond all of that sounding so exciting, before we jump into those first questions, I definitely want to talk a little bit about your book. And then I love the way that you started with a letter from you that really kind of sets up the tone for where your mind was at and where your heart was at while you were writing this. Because I come from a communication background, and understanding the context in which something is put into the world is so important. So I think by you creating that letter and writing that letter and having it actually included, really gives us a good point of view as readers of where your mind was at. And I think that builds into the first question of what inspired you to start writing in general, and how did that connect with writing Poisons?
Yeah, so what inspired me to write? I probably can pinpoint it 4th grade. Um, it was back in the early 2000s. I came home from school, and this is going to show my age a bit, but there was something called a TiVo. And so a TiVo was like it's like the granddaddy of like recorded streaming, like
Mhm.
TV shows. And so I was so fascinated by it. I turned on the TV, and there were some episodes already on there. And so my dad had recorded the first few episodes of a anime called Inuyasha. And it was episode 1, 2, and I believe 3. And so I sat down and I watched it, and all 3 episodes, and I was so obsessed. I kept watching it over and over again. I was so fascinated by this anime, by this TV show. And so it grew that basically like forced my love for stories and plots and characters and plot twists and world building and fantasy and adventure and action. Like, that is kind of where the seed was planted. And as I progressed, through 4th grade, 5th grade, etc., I, sat down and I was looking for more information about Inuyasha. And so I went onto the Great Wide Web, and I came across something called fan fiction. And I was so fascinated. I was like, oh my God, these are free stories about characters that I love. Oh my God. And so I came across fanfiction.net,
Mhm.
and that is what solidified my love for writing,
Mhm.
having free stories that I'm able to consume. And so eventually, as I was consuming the fan fiction and I was progressing through the series, I began writing my own little fan fiction in my own little notebooks. And so over the years, as I grew up, it moved from writing in a notebook to writing in WordPad to writing in like a bootleg Microsoft Word to writing it officially in Word and publishing it on fanfiction.net. And so I began with Inuyasha, but then over the years I moved on to other TV shows, anime, not anime, and that helped build my writing skills. It helped me learn how to take constructive
Mhm.
criticism and non-constructive criticism. And so um once I neared 16 years old, I had to drop out of high school at 16 because I had chronic illnesses. So
Oh.
I dropped out at 16, and as I was getting my GED at night, I had a lot of time during the day. So I slowly began to move away from writing fan fiction, and I wanted to start writing stories where people actually looked like me. And
Yeah.
so I took the plunge and I began writing original fiction, but it was very scary because I was so used to having characters and worlds and magic systems that people told to me. And I
Mhm.
used it how I saw fit. But now I have to create the characters. I have to create the stories. I have to create the magic system and the rules. And that was very, very terrifying. I didn't think I had an
Mhm.
ending.
Mhm.
So I ever since I was 16 years old, I wrote original fiction,
Mhm.
and I haven't looked back.
That's good. And we are all the better for it, right? Um, I've never been one of the I I barely read fan fiction as a reader. I'm late, so late to the anime scene and mangas, but now that I've started writing and then or writing seriously, I look at it all differently. Because I loved shows and I thought of I wanted to be a playwright when I was younger. So that definitely kind of built into it, where I was enamored with TV shows. And I think we have the same love of those stories in the fantasy worlds. I also leaned heavily into fantasy where give me the mythologies, give me the love stories, give me the crazy magic, and take me out of this world that we're currently in. So I can totally see that. But fan fiction was never one of those things I got into, but my daughter does. So she's definitely into that. And luckily nowadays they have Wattpad for somewhat and so many other avenues for the short novels and stuff. But when you think about how you never looked back, what do you think you enjoy most about writing?
I what I enjoy, well, when I sat down and I began writing my original stories,
Mhm.
I really needed a an outlet because I
Mhm.
was struggling with chronic illnesses, and then I was also struggling with mental illnesses as a teenager. I really needed an outlet to explore feelings. And then also, when you have chronic illnesses and when you have mental illnesses, you lose a sense of control. You feel like you've lost a sense of control. And
Yes.
so when you're writing, you have that control because you're creating the world exactly how you want it. You're
Mhm.
creating the characters and you're writing their journeys exactly. Well, try to write it exactly how you want it.
Mhm.
And then also you can use the characters to explore your feelings, issues that are very, very important to you. And then also, in lieu of murdering real people, you you can murder fictional people, and it's legal. And you
Yes.
can also torment fictional people, and it's legal. And so I love putting my characters through it. I
Yeah.
love putting them through it. And so that was really fun to me. And so that's one of the things that I really enjoy most about writing. And even to this day, I still have chronic illnesses and I still have
Mm.
mental illnesses. And so
Yes.
writing gives me that outlet where I can explore the things that really, really bother me in the world. And
Mhm.
then I can also do things to characters that I want to do too, you know.
All right. That's such an interesting take when it's like you think of this ideas and I love the way that stories and writing can help us go through that cathartic moment and it can help us work through and navigate these issues. And so I write middle grade and so kidlit, so you're just a step above. And the way that we can help the younger readers go through those issues. So you talk about writing since 16. you're saying you have all of these emotions and all of these hormones running through you, and then if you put on top of that illness where you feel that you're isolated from the world, you really need to, I love how you talk about writing as this outlet, for us to be able to navigate and negotiate those feelings. And so that's such an important message, I think, even for young writers and young readers, to keep sticking with it, right? And to go through it. But I know, like, being young, if you're like, how do I sit and how do I navigate these things? How do I sit there and try to pinpoint and build this whole entire world? So what do you think, in terms of when you consider the entire writing process, what do you feel like is the most challenging for new writers and for experienced writers as well?
I think the most challenging part of the writing process is the ability to believe in yourself. There is, I struggle with imposter syndrome.
Mhm. Don't
And
we all?
so even though it pleases me to hear people when they say, "Oh my God, I love your writing," or "Oh my God, I love this plot twist," or "Oh my God, I love this character. I love what you did." Even though that's wonderful, especially in traditional publishing, you
Mhm.
get a lot of no's. You get a
Oh,
lot of, "Wow, this is amazing work," but no.
but right.
Or and so I feel like imposter syndrome is the hardest part of the writing process.
Mm.
And that imposter syndrome, especially if you have mental illnesses,
Mhm.
it's like the two of them buddy up
Yeah.
and they beat you in an alleyway.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
It's like they beat you in an alleyway. And so it really tanks your
Mhm.
ability, or it really impacts your ability to want to write, to want to
Mhm.
create stories, to want to do the things to get the story where it needs to be, to get the story out there to an editor or
Mhm.
to an agent or to a beta reader or an alpha reader or a critique partner. It's really, I feel like imposter syndrome is the hardest part,
Yeah.
especially if you struggle with perfectionism.
Mhm.
Like, it took me a long time to let go of the idea that my first draft has to be perfect.
Perfect.
It took me a very, very long time, and I'm still struggling with it right now. And I've come up with, techniques to help me move past that just so I
Mm.
can get the words down. And it
Mhm.
also helps with my imposter syndrome,
Right.
because I dictate now. Before,
Um,
I was typing
typing.
and looking at a blank screen and looking at the previous words and going, "Oh my God, this is awful." But
Mhm.
now I dictate. I bought a little headset,
Mm.
and I dictate the story, and then I transcribe it, and then I
Mhm.
polish it up that way. And it's a lot easier to just talk the story out loud,
Yes.
than trying to pull the words out one at a time at a keyboard. But I still do a mix
Mm.
of both.
Mhm.
But because of my imposter syndrome and that need for perfectionism, I had to like change the way I draft to
Mm.
for my own sanity.
Yeah. Yeah. That notion of, I hear a lot of authors now, from different panels and different people that I've met from the community. A lot of people go the dictation route, either for, you know, dexterity issues, or you can't type anymore. You might have carpal tunnel. You can't sit there. But that image of staring at a blank page doesn't always help you. And then if you're writing on the computer, nowadays you can sit and like open up a new browser and then your brain goes off on a totally different
Mhm.
tangent. So being able to, that's really interesting that you can sit there, or you've decided to, that doing dictations are better, for you, and getting the words out. And I can definitely relate to the perfectionism issue, right? I'm a Virgo. So it's like we grow up and it's like everything. I think, like, when you said it, it's like the first thing was like, I have this flashback of being 15, 16, and like getting a bad grade. And it's like, you guys don't understand. I have to be perfect. And then this,
Mhm.
you're stuck in this world where you've got to be so on point, all of the time. But the impacts of having imposter syndrome is definitely devastating. And it makes me think of when I met my husband in college. He was a coach, and we were on the speech and debate team, and his debaters, even if they were awful, they all walked around with this air of arrogance about them, like they were so amazing. And when you keep walking around with that attitude, I think it, like, it sinks in, and the people around you are going to want to be supportive. So I hope you have that support group that says you are awesome. Don't let it, don't let it don't let anybody else tell you differently. And clearly, I imagine part of your support system would have to be critique partners. And of course, your champion would be your agent. So can you tell us a little bit about how you found your agent?
Yeah, so I'm on my second agent. My
Mm,
agent is Andrea Morrison of Writer's House. Um, and so I write really weird stories. I write weird stories, and I explore a lot of weird things. And so I understood that that impacted my ability to sell more
mhm,
books. Especially since I feel like my writing is a little bit more, or the things that I like to explore is a lot bit more niche. And
mhm,
so, when I thought, I knew it was best to leave my first agent, who was
mm,
perfectly fine. It's just when you want to go in a very specific direction, sometimes even if your agent is magnificent,
mhm,
sometimes you guys are going in two separate directions, and it's time to find another agent that might fit what you want to go for better, because it's I feel like with each book you discover yourself, and with some
mhm,
people they're able to discover themselves with each book, and their agent is perfect for every single book. And then for
mhm,
other people, their agent might be perfect for them for one book, but then for the next book or the books that you would like to write in the future, they might
mhm.
not be the best fit. And so
Right.
after I left him, I queried again. So I queried from 2019 to 2020. And then 2020, I got my agent, my first agent. And then now it's 2023. I have two book deals under my belt. It's different now. Querying is
Mhm,
different because now it's, in the beginning, it's, I'll take anybody.
mhm,
Please, someone take me
mhm,
home. But like when you have like a few books under your belt, now it's, I want to stay with someone that will be my
mhm.
forever home.
Right.
I don't want to leave. And
Right.
so you approach querying differently, and
Mhm,
it's a very different process. And your questions that you ask agents if you get an offer, they're going to be very, very different. And
yeah.
so, in um I got 3 offers, and I had to interview each agent. I had to interview each agent, and I gave them the exact same information. I gave them the exact same questions, and I took down everything that they said
Mhm,
so that I could compare. And if there was
mhm,
any question, or if there was any area that I felt I needed more information on, then
mhm.
I emailed them, because I wanted to see what their responses
This
were
is right. Yeah.
for that question. And then I also spoke with their clients, and I
Mm,
compared, the pros and the cons based on what the clients told me. And it was hard.
mhm,
It was hard to boil it down, but in the end, I felt like my agent Andrea was the best choice for what I was wanting to do. And it's
mhm.
always important to also be upfront and honest. I feel
Right.
like when you first get an agent, it's very much like you're very much awestruck,
Really
starstruck,
excited. Yeah.
because it's like, oh my God, someone wants me. And so
Right.
you don't think about the questions or the important things after, the things that could happen after you sign with an agent. It's
Mhm,
just the fact, like, oh my God, someone wants me. And then
mhm.
over time, with the books and with the deals and etc., your focus starts to shift, and then you're just brutally honest
Yeah.
And it's better to be upfront and honest with an agent so they know exactly what you
Mhm.
want going into a partnership, as opposed to just being afraid like, oh, if I say the wrong thing, then they're going to rescind their offer. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
if you say the thing that you need to say and they rescind their offer, then they weren't a good fit for you anyway.
Right, you know?
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so that I mean, that definitely ties into the question of what do you think is something you wish you knew before becoming an author? And so it sounds like that business and that negotiation part, is definitely part of it, right? But, like, or are there other things that you might think, they're like, "Darn it, I wish I knew this about the business, about writing, about publishing in general, before you signed your deals?"
As silly as this sounds, the most challenging, well, the one thing that I wish that I had known before becoming an author, and as silly as this sounds, and I'm sure what I'm about to say, y'all are gonna be like, yeah, well, duh. But contracts,
Mhm,
the importance of contracts, and that it's important that you read the contracts
mhm,
thoroughly,
mhm,
and that you highlight or you flag anything that you are confused about, and you
mhm,
get clarification and you unpack it. Doesn't matter
mhm,
if it is a literary agent contract or
mhm,
agency contract, or if it is a publisher contract.
mhm,
Like, you really need to understand the finer details of the contract. Do not leave to question.
mhm,
um if you're confused about a clause, or if you're confused about what it
mhm.
means, don't go, well, I just want to sign the contract because I want a book deal, or I just want to sign a contract because I want an agent. Like, I understand like 90% of this contract, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Do
No.
not do that. Have deep, long conversations so that
Mhm,
you can come away with a full understanding of what you're
mhm.
getting yourself into. And I know people are going to be like, wow, that's silly, like, duh, but no, not
No.
duh. Like, myself,
Agreed.
other authors, you never, many authors have gotten to the point where something happens and they have
Mhm,
to look to their contract to see what is within their rights.
mhm.
And then when they look into their contract, they realize, like, oh,
I
this
didn't
is
realize that.
not in my favor. This situation is not in my favor.
Yeah.
And you find out 3, 4 years,
Mhm.
or 1 year, how many ever years too
Yeah.
late, that
Yeah.
you've been walking around with your name on a contract, and there's a clause in there that feels like a bomb
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
waiting to
man.
go off. It's very, very, very important to unpack, ask questions, so many questions. And if possible, you can also try to negotiate
Mhm,
clause changes. Like,
mhm,
try. Don't just think like, oh, well, it's set in stone. Not always. Not
mhm,
everything is always set in stone, but also when it comes to contracts, for a publisher, even
mhm.
if an agent or an agency or the legal department negotiates on your behalf, they're wonderful, they're talented. Go through it.
Mhm.
Go through it. And don't just sign something because you feel like, oh, my agent knows what they're doing. The legal department knows, everyone knows what they're doing. Yes, they know what they're doing, but you still need to, you might not agree with the things that you're going to be signing in that contract. And
Yes.
so it's very, very important.
To
Look at
know
those
that.
contracts. Look at the
Yeah.
contract.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, um, of any talent-based career, right? Like, when we say it and then, like, my husband loves watching sports, and so then and then we love music, we love entertainment, everything in entertainment, and you sit there and you will be starstruck with, like, celebrities and look at all these, young kids getting all these huge deals, uh, but just the way that we seem like we fail to prepare ourselves and people who are interested in that in looking at the business details And so then that's why you hear all these horror stories of people caught up across multiple fields, caught up in these horrible, horrible contracts. And it's just like I sit there and I go, if only you could just teach a 1 day workshop. Let me do a workshop to let's break down these contracts for anybody who's interested in being an author, anyone who wants to be an illustrator, anything entertainment based, where you are literally signing away your rights to something in a in a legal document. That you want to be able to do that because you feel like you feel you definitely see it with athletes getting they're getting taken advantage of. And then so nobody wants to, it's a delicate balance of wanting to be so happy that somebody wants your work, but not be so happy that somebody wants your work. So it's such a double-edged sword.
But
Where
also, like an example is, say in a contract, and
Mhm,
this is very, I feel like this is very like relatable because you hear about
mhm,
this all the time.
yeah,
There's a lot of agents that leave the industry, or they're getting fired, or they're moving to a different agency. And so
mhm,
in contracts, you should always be on the lookout for, say, a clause that says, if my agent leaves or is fired, who is responsible for me?
mhm,
It
mhm,
will the agency put
mhm,
me with someone else, give me that option, or am I out in the cold, but the agency
right,
still gets to keep the contracts that they've made, but I'm
mhm,
unagented now? Like, it's
mhm.
stuff like that that you need to be
You
mindful.
need to know. Yeah,
um so that's a really good clause to keep in mind.
yeah.
And other clauses, like, well, nowadays it's like you need to make sure that you have like an anti-AI clause. And even though it's
Mhm,
been very hard for some publishers to agree to put that, like,
mhm,
it's stuff like that where
mhm,
you need to make sure that you're protected, because
mhm.
when you least expect it, that's when you will
They're gonna slap.
when you'll need that contract the
Yeah.
most. So it's,
Oh.
oh, and then also another contract, another clause is like, well, they've actually passed a law, so I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But it was a non-compete clause
Mhm,
where you couldn't write a certain age category and or
mhm,
genre for a certain amount of time if you
mhm,
published with a publisher. But now they passed the law, and so within the upcoming months or years,
mhm.
non-compete clauses,
Or
will be obsolete.
yeah. Yeah. And then that's the again, I think in general, it's the business part of writing that you don't always consider, because it's hard enough to sit there and write the thing. So everybody assumes the challenging part of the career is the writing part and the creation part. But it's definitely the business part, that we tend to not pay attention to. So I think I feel like I was just on the we're older debut authors panel. So like I'm 44 and I'm debuting at 44. Um, but I've lived so many lives before and I've run businesses before. So walking into the industry, I still treat it like a business. So I think I was fortunate that way. Versus everybody, we're not always thinking business wise. And it's so important because you do have to treat your career, and your products and your books as a business, just to make sure you've got those protections in place,
Mhm.
right? But given all that unfun stuff, what would you say is the best part of your writing career?
I feel like the best part is really, now that my books are out into the world, is
Mhm,
really being able to connect with other authors and
mhm,
readers and educators and librarians and booksellers, and being able to connect with them and get a better understanding of how they've consumed my story, so that I can
mhm.
better myself as a writer and keep things in mind for the future, because I am a debut and I still have a lot to learn
Yeah,
and know.
you
And
do.
books aren't perfect, and I know
No.
that I could have did a lot of things differently with the books I have written. And so
Mhm,
being able to connect with them to see what is working, what
mhm,
is not working, and keeping that tucked into the back of my mind because I'm hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, um, I feel like that's the best part. And it's good to also hear from people that enjoy your work.
Mhm.
Especially when you're in an industry where they love to say no and they love to reject you, and you have to develop a very thick skin because you'll get a lot of no's for very weird reasons, and
Mhm.
sometimes you're left trying to figure out what was the reason behind the no, and
Right.
you will never understand why you received that no.
Right.
So it's nice to be able to connect with people that enjoy your work, and it's also nice to
Mhm.
be able to connect with people that can give you constructive feedback so that you can
Right.
apply it to your future books.
Mhm. Awesome. Yeah. That's definitely the constructive feedback is important, and the ability to not let constant rejection stop you from continuing to push your story. I think a lot of authors, or at least I know for myself, I there has to be this final moment where you just sit there and you kinda say, "I know this story is good. And I know it's going to help somebody. So even in the face of all these no's, I have to keep pushing. And then even at least that's why at least WriteHive is really awesome where we have so many indie publishers. You have people who are deciding to self-publish, and we have small press representation where they're taking a chance on those niche stories, because there's somebody out there who really needs that story. And as long as you as the creator believe that and you continue to push forward in the face of all those no's, it's it's really hard. It's
Mhm.
but it's like you I think that moment of getting a fan coming up saying, "Hey, this is amazing," has to be more rewarding than the wall of no's that you are going to
It's a very
encounter.
lovely, lovely
Yeah.
feeling. It's a very lovely, lovely experience.
Yeah.
And it's also very humbling. It's
Mhm.
a very humbling experience um, for someone to be able to connect with your work on a level where they feel comfortable enough to walk up to you and say, I really enjoy your work. I really enjoy your
Yeah.
book." So, it's a very humbling experience.
Awesome. So Nick, what are you working on now?
So I was working on a project that was to come immediately after The Poisons We Drink. I put a pause on that.
Mm,
And so for now, I feel like sometimes it's best to stop, especially when you're trying to not, especially when you're trying to figure out the mechanics of the world. I'm
mm.
a pantser, so I have I might understand a concept,
Mhm,
or I might have plot points or
mhm.
and what have you, but I really have to build out the world from the ground up, because even if
Right,
I don't know where my characters are going, I can build out the world so that I have options and ideas of where to send them,
right.
so that they can get what they need, and so that they can get their butts kicked wherever they go in the
Mhm.
story. And so I stopped writing it because I just felt like I needed more time to stew on the world building and magic
Mhm,
system, because otherwise I'm just stumbling through the
mhm,
story, and it just really didn't, even if I'm not writing it because it's first draft, even though I'm not writing it for it to be perfect, um,
mhm,
I just felt like I was stumbling through the story,
mhm.
and I just really didn't know the world. And I prefer to know as much of the world as possible when I am world building. So I'm just
Right.
letting that stew. But I have 2 projects that are on submission, so I'm I'll say that that's my little answer, that I'm working on. I'm working on trying to get these books published.
Mhm.
So yeah, I have a middle grade, which is like a fairy tale detective story.
Oh, sounds
Um,
fun.
yeah, I love it. And then I have a Lovecraftian horror, dark academia,
Mhm,
that's set in the 1960s, that I
mhm,
wrote it alongside The Poisons We Drink in 2017, and I left it on the back burner and
mm.
proceeded to finish writing The Poisons We Drink. And so it's been waiting for me since 2017.
Oh,
And But I'm absolutely obsessed with it. The world is fully fleshed. Like I love the magic system,
Mhm.
even though I can't stand math. I like the magic system, so I'm gonna pretend that I know what I'm talking about when I when I write this magic system. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. That sounds, I mean, they both sound fun and exciting. And then I think of, I definitely, I'm a plotter, so I love outlines and I have to outline everything, but I don't have really in-depth outlines. I rely on the keyword outlines and then we'll kind of go and see where it goes from there. And so now going into, I'm working on the second of the second in the series, and it feels like I know the characters much better, so the writing seems a little bit easier. And it's like you know where the story's supposed to go, but the sitting down part and actually doing it is the hard part for me.
And funnily enough, even though I'm a pantser, the
Hmm.
publishing industry hates pantsers
They
because
do.
if we want to write on proposal, we have to have an outline. And I know people,
Yeah.
they will write vague outlines. I cannot write a vague outline. If I, as a pantser, have to sit down and write an outline, I literally have to brain dump every possible thing
Right.
into that outline and then organize it in a logical
Figured.
sense, like afterwards. So, like, my outlines are ridiculously long. They're like several thousand words long
Oh my
because
goodness.
I have to understand the world in
Yeah.
everything. And so it's like half world building Bible,
Hmm.
half plot, but it's more world building Bible than
Hmm.
plot.
Then plot.
Um, for the outline, it'll
Right.
have like the plot points and the
Hmm.
twists and the big moments, but for the most
Hmm.
part, it's just me trying to make sense of the world. And
Hmm.
honestly, that's publishing's fault.
Yeah.
Don't let pantsers have outlines.
Right. Well, then it's like if you do plot everything out and you do, if you are a plotter, right, then and you're then everything's already predetermined. And then it's like, oh, I don't want this story because we already know exactly where it's going. It's following the same arc and it's following the same outline. It's like, so which do you want? Do you want us to kind of just knock your socks off
Mhm.
and throw you for a loop, or do you want us to follow this rigid pattern? It's like decide one way or the other. But it's definitely that debate is always going to continue of like plotters versus planters. So it'll go. It's never, there's never going to be one side
It's
better than the
never
other.
going to end. It's never gonna
Right.
end.
Alright, so kind of going back into Poisons We Drink, if a reader could take one thing from your books, one lesson that they should learn, what would you hope for that to be?
For the poisons we drink.
For the Poisons We Drink book, what do you want the
Um,
lessons for the reader?
I want the lesson to be that it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be angry. I feel like when you are marginalized, when you're a person of
Mhm,
color, when you're disabled, or when you're queer, um, I and what have you, I feel like when we are angry, people say it's not justified.
mhm,
And so we always have to argue our points of why we're angry and express it. And when we express things, it feels like, we're treated like a threat because how dare we say how we feel about things that are affecting us in the world? And
mhm,
so with the poisons we drink, Venus, she's very much so much done with the world that she's very
mhm.
cynical and she doesn't care about the world. She actually prefers to see it burn, but
Right.
she doesn't want to be the one that's holding the match and flicking it into
Mhm.
the wood. She wants to be the one that just stands on the sidelines and
Mhm.
watch everyone else burn it. And so
Mhm.
throughout the story, she has to come to terms with her anger,
Mhm.
embracing her anger. And then she also has to come to terms with, she has to do things to, create the world that she wants to be a part of, that she wants to see, not the world that she's currently in. And
Mhm.
so, and through the story, she has to be the one that learns that she's going to have to pick up the match so that it really, so that the world, she can set the world on fire.
Mhm.
Because sometimes that's just how it goes. And so I wrote the story because I I wrote it in response to the 2016 elections.
Mhm.
And I went through stages of grief
Mhm.
um when I found out about the elections. Like it was election night,
Mhm.
November 2016. When I was watching it, like Hillary was winning, I went to sleep. I woke up, Trump won. I was like, what happened?
Mhm.
And so it was very, and I live in Florida.
Yeah, I was just
And
thinking that.
so it was very difficult. Like it was like not the culture, like everything was still the same, but it just was cranked up
Mhm.
and people were getting really like, they were getting really comfortable about,
Mhm.
you know, who
Everything.
they hate and
Right.
and things like that. And so I kind of went through stages of grief because it was just becoming too much. And
Mhm.
um, when I finally sat down to write The Poisons We Drink, and I decided to make it about politics, I got to explore my anger of what it
Mhm.
means and what it means to be a Black person, a Black girl, a Black
Mhm.
woman, in a world or a country or a place that does not want you and views you
Mhm.
as a threat for simply existing.
Right.
And so, what I want readers to take away from my story is that you are justified in your anger. Like white folk can't be the only ones that are justified in their anger marching through the
Right.
streets.
Yes.
Like you are absolutely justified in your anger, and you need to do what you need to do to
Mhm.
turn the world into what you want it to be, so
Mhm.
that you are accepted there. No
Yeah.
one should be born into a place as an outsider.
Right.
Everyone should be wanted and accepted.
Right. Yeah. That's a great lesson. And because I think of uh, that's what I knew when I talked about reading your letter to the readers, right? Having that letter of the authors is so important because it'll let readers, if you were, if you don't remember what date that was, I didn't have to look up the date, but as soon as I'm not a big political junkie, but everything in the country changed then. And so as soon as I saw that date and then reading your letter, I'm just like, I can flip and I can recall and I can go back and I think of for me when COVID happened, all the Asian hate, right? People just walking, somebody who's of Asian descent. I'm Thai, but I'm still seen as Chinese or whatever, and we're like the epitome of foreignness. And so having that hate always directed towards you for no reason at all, um, it gets too much. It gets to be so overbearing and overwhelming. And then it makes me fear for my kids because my kids are biracial. And so we're like, my husband's African American, I'm Thai American, and I'm born and raised in America, but I grew up in a time where in the 80s, I'm still Oriental, right? Every time somebody looks at me, they're like, where are you from? And my response would be Los Angeles. And they're like, no, 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 no. Where are you from? Like Los Angeles. I just told you,
Mhm.
and I go back to Thailand and I'm the foreigner over there. So it's like not being able to belong. So I think that's such an important message. And learning how to be okay with that anger is such an important message that it's okay. You're still a person and you're allowed to have these plethoras of emotions, and however you choose to channel it. It's not something that's not belong to you. I think whenever if I feel like for me, we're growing up in the age of model minorities. Asians don't say anything, right? I have the generation before me, my parents don't make waves. We're in the yellow feet, right? Don't make waves, don't say anything. And I definitely raise my kids to not be that way. So they talk back to me all the time. But I'm like, I'm okay with that. As long as you take that out and you know how to deal with it in the right way outside. It's important for your voice to be heard. So I think that's a great message for us to let young readers know, and older readers as well, uh, that we want to change the narrative and then we have to start somewhere. Right. Well, that's awesome. So then
Exactly.
when we're thinking of that, what do you think or what changes would you like to see in terms of the future of urban fantasy as a genre or YA fiction in general?
I do think that more and more Black authors are being welcome or entering
Mhm,
the urban fantasy or even the subgenres
mhm,
in entering that space. Um, what I would like to see, what changes I would like to see is that I'm a Southerner, and I feel like when it comes to traditional publishing,
mhm,
it's very concentrated and like everyone is that are gatekeepers in publishing. They come
yeah.
from very specific areas in the United States.
Mhm,
And so they have very, and so because of that, when you, it's already bad enough when you are a BIPOC author, and
mhm,
you're coming to them with a story. And so they're using their reference of what they think your culture and identity is on whether
mhm,
or not the story is good or not. And they don't have to
mhm.
worry about that when it comes to white authors, right? It's
No.
just like, is it good, or if
Yeah.
do I like it? Do I want money for it? Whatever. But no, when it comes to BIPOC authors, it's here's what I know about this identity.
Mhm,
It's not matching what I know.
mhm,
And so
mhm,
because of that, it's not good. And
mhm.
I'm going to avoid it.
Reject it.
Well, the issue that I'm having is there are within the BIPOC community, there's still subsets
Mhm,
within the community. And so for instance, I'm a Black Southern author. I'm a
mhm,
Black Southern author. And so Southernness is very, very rich, very, very complex. Black Southernness is very, very rich and very, very complex. And so I want to write about Southern Black characters. I
mhm,
want to write about Southern Black characters, but the issue is that there's a lot of disconnect within
mhm,
the publishing industry in regards to Southern Black characters because I don't write them the way they expect a
mhm,
Southern Black person to be.
mhm,
And so it's difficult. I wish that publishing was more open
mhm.
in regards to just because someone is Black or Asian or Latinx
Mhm,
or what have you, there's still subsets within that. And
mhm,
just because what you view their identity to be doesn't match up with what's in your head doesn't mean that the story isn't of quality.
mhm,
It doesn't mean that the story isn't of quality. And I feel
mhm.
like I need to see more changes. And I will say that it's not just white traditional publishing.
Mhm,
You also have BIPOC within the industry
mhm.
that if they read something, even if it's within their own identity, if they read
It does.
something, if it doesn't match up with what they know the
Mhm,
culture or identity to be, even though
mhm,
they're part of it and they understand that, their identity is not a monolith.
mhm,
Once again, it's not what I expected it to be because that's not
mhm.
what I know it to be, and that's not the experience that I know it to be. So I have to say no because I
Right,
can't connect to it.
right.
And so I wish that there was just more openness
Mhm.
because there are a lot of talented authors across all cultures and identities and marginalizations that are being told no or left out
Mhm,
in the cold because how they have written their identity in their story
mhm.
does not match up with the blueprint that or the mold that traditional publishing expects of that identity.
Yeah.
I need to see changes about that. And I feel like it goes from agent,
Mhm,
editors, whoever does second reads, whoever's sitting at the table for acquisitions. I feel
mhm,
like there's just so much more hoops to jump through. And so that's why when it comes to BIPOC,
mhm,
specifically when it comes to BIPOC authors,
mhm.
we are expected, or some of us force ourselves to write our stories in a very specific way, because
Yeah,
that's the only way that we could get our foot in the door. And it should
right.
not be that
Shouldn't
way.
be that way. Right.
And so that's the changes that I'm sorry, I just went off. I
No,
went off,
I
but
love
that's the
it.
changes that I want to see. I'm tired of hearing I can't connect with this.
Mhm.
If you can't connect with a human, but
What's wrong
but
with
but
you?
you can't connect with a human, but you can connect with like a 10-foot blue alien with horns and fangs.
Yeah, that's all realistic. How does that work?
Make the
Right.
math.
Make it work.
You can
Yes. No.
connect with vampires and werewolves, and you can connect with all of these, but you
Mhm.
can't connect with
Mhm.
BIPOC authors
Authors.
writing their stories the way how they've experienced their identity
Yes.
and their culture.
Mhm.
Make it make
Right. Make
sense.
it make sense. Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, it's not a rant at all. It's a truth that needs to be spoken because it is like we're all experiencing it. And this idea that, you know, why is it that BIPOC authors have to raise the bar for what we're writing and we're being judged on a different scale as other not, white authors. And it's not, you say you want to level the playing fields, but definitely even, you're facing readers who are going to give you bad reviews because it doesn't sync with what their vision of it is. And then I think like as you were saying it, it makes me think of like I love my editors and I love my publishers, and so I'm unagented and I have a small press. So they're in Muslim press, and it's Scheherazade Shells, and this is their non-Muslim imprint. I'm the first book for Sora Books. And we go through these conversations where they want to change the paradigm, right? They want to shift the image of Muslim representation. And they liked Skylight because I sat there and we had conversations. I have Thai words written all throughout my book. And so many of the early reviews from NetGalley were like, there's all this strange language in this book. And I don't understand why this strange language is there. And they would be so upset for me. And I know that I can't respond to it because then if you respond, then you're the bad author trying to sit there and go, what's wrong with you people? But they would be angry on my behalf. And I think that's a moment when I knew they were really a perfect match for me, where it's this idea that you understand there's a certain base of readers out there who are going to slam your work regardless. And you have to be okay with it. And so just because we're not writing or fitting or conforming to your picture, and I love the use of the mold. That's always an image that I've dealt with my whole life. And I love, from an academic point of view, I'm an academic at heart. I love that concept of breaking the mold. So I think what you're saying is, like we want to continue fighting for it and pushing for it as BIPOC creators to not adhere to whatever those standards are. And it's a lot easier said than done. But I'm glad that we have some presses and some advocates who are on our side who do try to share and understand. And it's almost like maybe if you don't connect with this story, it's all the more reason why you should pick it up or at least consider it. So maybe that's hopefully in the years to come, we'll see that
That's
change
my hope.
happening.
That's
Right?
that's my hope. And I do think it kind of goes into like, especially when it comes to BIPOC stories, there's
Mhm.
almost this expectation that there needs to be a white character that follows the same journey as
Mhm.
the main character or
Mhm.
characters, so that people can step into that character's shoes and use them
Mhm.
as an avatar
Mhm.
to make sense of the world. And you see that in a lot of BIPOC books, like,
Mhm.
and sometimes when you're talking to authors behind the scenes and they're like, yeah, I put that in there because I put that character in there because of
Mhm.
XYZ. And that's the
Mhm.
character that a lot of people run to, because
Mhm.
that is because whiteness is equated to
Mhm.
familiarity and
Mhm.
comfort.
And humanity.
Yes.
Anything who's not, yeah. And so I know that like none of my characters are white. Zero. I never explicitly say it. Well, I guess her classmates, the main character lives grew up in Colorado. So that's like the epitome of for me. But
Right.
my main character is not white. She's Thai. She just doesn't know it her whole life. So it's you've got that chosen one trope where you're sent away. But when you read it and you have to deal with those issues, right? And you hopefully help kids understand you're still you and you're still a person.
Right.
Just because you don't fit whatever that role model or that standard image is, doesn't mean you're any less than. And coming to terms with that is an important lesson, and it's hard for even as adults for us to accept it. So imparting those messages in, I hope that gets through. And I feel like even dealing with issues like you're saying with poisons, of dealing with issues of anger, right? Just the concept of using love as a poison, love as a weapon, weaponizing something that's supposed to be so
Mhm.
beautiful and glorious in this, right? That in and of itself sounds like, you're turning the story around. And we have to be able to think of issues from both sides and from different sides, and not feel like you have to say there's good people on both sides, right? Like we don't want to do that.
And that's
Um,
why I wrote characters that were morally gray. Um,
yeah.
I didn't write them to be loved. I wrote them to be
Hmm.
understood, which is what I
Hmm.
say in my letter. And I feel like that's very important, especially when it
Hmm.
comes to BIPOC. There is a lot of hate
Hmm.
towards BIPOC that are morally gray. And there's
Hmm.
this even when you tell people that characters are unlikable, they still expect likability,
Hmm.
but they give grace to white characters.
Yeah.
And I've learned over the years that when people say that they want angry black characters, that
Hmm.
yes, let's have angry black girls like burn the world down, or let's have
Hmm.
angry BIPOC characters burn the world down. I've realized that they don't want angry,
Yeah.
they want upset.
Yeah.
It's a big difference between the two.
Right. 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 It's like on a scale of 1 to 10, you don't get to be 10. You need to like teeter right between like 4 and 5, because we can handle that. And
Yeah,
anything beyond, it's threatening. It's too much. It's too
bingo,
much.
bingo. Mhm.
Definitely. Next question. What would you say is your favorite part about writing urban fantasy?
I'd say my favorite part is really the world building. I love world building so much. It's one of the things that brings me so much joy, so much pleasure. I love just starting out with a seed of something and
Mhm.
then asking questions and then
Mhm.
just building a landscape that my characters are going to be on, whether it's
Mhm.
going to be a landscape that is welcoming and inviting, or a
Mhm.
landscape that is going to be very risky and dangerous,
Mhm.
or those places are in between.
Mhm.
I really enjoy the world building because I feel like at the core, that's what makes fantasy what it is. How can you take, an aspect of something and then just stretch it out so that it becomes a place for your characters to move about and stumble around. And that's why I try to build out the world as much as possible, the world
Mhm.
building as much as possible, so that if my characters are stumbling through the story, I'm stumbling with them because
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out the story along the way.
No way.
So I personally love the world building, and I feel like marginalized authors do a phenomenal job of world building. We come up with
Mhm.
so many amazing things, but we think outside of the box,
Mhm.
because we think outside of the box with a lot of different things and we have our own spin and twist on things, oftentimes that's not viewed as commercial or marketable. And so our
Right.
books end up being left out in the cold. Either
Mhm.
we don't get the agents or we don't get the book
Mhm.
deal, or we do get the book deal and we do get the agent, but we can't get sold, or
Mhm.
we might not get the the backing and support within the publisher to get that book out there to
Mhm.
as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So I love world building very, very much. And I
Mhm.
think it could be a very powerful thing when you
Mhm.
treat the world that your character is operating in as a character itself.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. The world. I definitely think in fantasy how the world has to be its own character. And you have to give as much time and effort into creating that character of the world as much as you do your main characters and your side characters and the villains. So I agree with you on that point wholeheartedly. For fantasy, we see our worlds as characters that need to be nurtured and created and developed. Right. So kind of along that line, we know that Write Hive's tagline is writing the future we need, right? So what does that look like for you?
I feel like writing the future that we need means that you don't hold yourself back from writing the stories that you want to write because
Mhm,
you're trying to get that book sold. I feel like it's writing stories that are true to you that your future self would be
mhm,
satisfied with, and your future audiences would be satisfied with.
mhm,
um I feel like a lot of us, we have heart books, we have soul books, we
mhm,
have we have blood sweat tear books, and we shave off pieces of that heart, we shave off pieces of that soul, we shave off pieces of the blood, sweat, and tears to make it more
mhm.
palpable
Yeah.
to a predominantly white industry so that we can
Mhm,
get our foot in the door. And with that, a lot of us, oftentimes, even though that's the book that might get us in the door,
mhm,
if you shave off enough of the book and it turns into something that you're not proud of, then
mhm,
you might look at that book with shame and,
mhm.
and embarrassment. And so it's important, like whatever book that you write, yes, we need money on the table, but it should be a book that you feel proud of, and
Mhm.
that you don't want to that you want a book that you feel proud of and that is authentic to you. Do not do not diminish your authenticity for someone else's palette.
Right.
Like it's not worth it, because if you do that, then later on down the road when you try to be yourself, then they're going to say that your true
That's
self
not
isn't
me.
marketable. It's easier to be authentic up front so
Right.
that you can see who can help you get to where you need to go, as opposed
Mhm.
to pretend to be something you're not, so
Right.
that you can get that book sold, or you can get that agent, or you can get what have you.
Mhm.
It's easier to
Yeah.
just be authentic and up front. So yes, write the stories that your future self can be proud of.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it because I think a lot of times when we, especially with debuts, like we don't always have our author brands in place. We're like, I don't know what my author brand is. I barely just finished writing this book and I got it out there and it's polished the way I'm happy with it. And I can't at the same time decide who I am as a author and be able to stick to that message or be true to that. But if you already do it in reverse, where you know naturally this is who you are and these are the messages you want to share and espouse, then if that's already built into your writing, then your author brand kind of just comes naturally from that. So I love the idea of having writing something that your future you would be proud of is a great way to look at it. On a different scent or angle, right? What would you consider are your favorite tropes to read? Something fun and lighthearted that we're shifting into.
Sorry, my
Favorite trope.
dog is sneezing. I don't
No, go
he could
ahead.
sneeze like 10 times. I don't, like, dude, chill.
We haven't heard one sneeze at all.
Oh my, okay, well then I just told on myself. Like, he's distracting me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what are my favorite tropes to write? I really, really love like cousin best friend relationships. I love cousins as your best friend, as your buddy,
Mm-hmm.
tropes. I really, really um I love a good like friends we've fallen out, and then trying to piece back what we had, but we can't. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what we call that trope, but we
Yeah.
can't piece it back together. So we're gonna sculpt something new from what we've broken, whatever
Mhm.
that is.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, I really love a good um oh, that's a really good question. I
So
have so
many.
many in my brain. Um, I would say I like childhood. I also like childhood friends to
Mhm.
enemies.
Mm,
I like childhood friends to enemies, and then like to whatever at after the enemies. I won't say lovers, but like whatever it is
whatever.
after the enemies. I do like that.
Those
Um,
are good.
I also just like I like a good cynical character. I like a
Mm,
really good cynical character that like moves to the story and just really does not care, and they're forced to start caring
mhm.
like because something happens. I really enjoy that. I also like a good like mentor, but the mentor is very morally gray. So I do like that kind of mentor as opposed to like expecting the mentor to be like Gandalf,
Yeah.
with like meet me on the fifth day of the fourth light, like whatever, like, okay, chill, dude.
Yeah.
No, like just it's okay. You can set the world on fire, like go
Yeah.
for it. Like,
Yeah.
just hyping you. Like I like that kind of stuff where
Mhm.
that morally ambiguous mentor as opposed to like, a goody two shoes
A
mentor.
prototype.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
think those are the tropes that I like.
Yeah, I think we like to live in the gray. Well, I definitely agree with you. Those all sound a lot of fun, but I think as I start writing, I lean more like I always root for the underdog. So any kind of underdog stories, I tend to lean that way. But I've developed a soft spot for all of us who are in the morally gray areas because we're all kind of morally gray most of the times. We just don't openly admit it all the time. So having, hopefully that'll be like the next subgenre we see out there of all the morally gray heroes that we
I
got
hope
there.
so, especially morally gray characters of color. That's really, really
Yes.
big because, as I said before, a lot of people say that they want morally gray characters, but
Hmm.
they really just want but if there were true morally gray characters, they would most likely hate them. But they
Hate
love
them.
white morally gray characters, especially white boys. Like
Yeah,
white, they eat that up. They
they
eat
do.
that
They
up
do.
like
Yeah.
salted caramel ice cream.
Right. Awesome. Well, this has been so much fun. So one last question, and it's always our fun ending question. So if you could choose one superpower to have, what would it be?
If I could choose one superpower to have, um, I would have the superpower where I'm able to resolve any issue that pops up in my life,
Mm.
whether it is like if my car is making a funny noise, like, boo, no, you're not.
You're
Shut up. Like, if I'm having bad, like, if I'm having like a bad day,
hmm
um like no, like fix it. If I need money, more money in my bank account so I can pay for
Yeah.
it, like fix it. Like I wish that I had like just the superpower to just fix issues that are happening in my life so that I can move safely and with comfort. Um through the world. So yeah, I would be a solution fixer. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to fix everybody's problems, but I would like to fix my problems.
First and foremost, let me take care of me first, right? It's like when you're in the airplane and they tell you you got to
Yep,
put the oxygen mask on you first
exactly.
before you help everybody else around you. So if you can't take care of you, then you're of no use to
Yep.
anybody else.
Let's call it like oxygen mask array of like yeah.
That's
Like oxygen mask manipulation.
something of
I
that
like
nature.
that.
Awesome. Well, Bethany, this has been so much fun. Before I end it, tell us where we can find you, where can we get the books? Where are you all the time?
Yeah, so you can find me predominantly on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. You can find
Hmm.
me on Twitter at Story Sorcery. You could also find me on bethanybaptiste.com. And you can find my books wherever they are sold. So yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'm gonna finish it. I had like blurb books and betas to finish reading, but I'm gonna go back and make sure that I finish this. So everyone, you all, thank you guys so much for joining us. Make sure that you check out Bethany's book, The Poisons We Drink. Absolutely fabulous read. So enjoy the rest of the conference. Be sure to join us, drop any questions in the board, and we will see you. Thank you so
Bye,
much.
y'all.
Bye.